Hello, and this is my the Crucible and Global Issues oral presentation. The slides are separate from the audio, and I will say it when I'm moving on to the next slide. Um, so I will begin now, starting with slide 2. The American government's role in society, as stated in the Declaration of Independence, is to secure humanity's natural rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what freedoms one may or may not receive is a contentious issue that requires debate among viewpoints to reach fair conclusions, because one singular mindset in any space leads to stagnation. This is precisely what occurs when religion is overly implemented into politics. As demonstrated by Arthur Miller's 1953 play, The Crucible, as a play written during an era of American history where religion became a tool of fear against the populace, the idea of religion's influence in politics is impossible to ignore. Through The Crucible, Miller demonstrates how religion reacts with politics during times of crisis and contention, how it is an unreliable force to empower any judicial system, and how it can lead a government astray from its purpose of upholding natural rights. Moving on to slide 3. Because religion places God and the divine to the utmost power over the universe, when people in the government are aligned with Christ, a government figure would naturally be proud of serving their Lord, which may lead them to associating themselves with that divinity, which is opposed to the principles of a democracy. As seen with Danforth, this pride can turn to piety when the sanctity of their morals are questioned. With such devout faith and high status, Danforth, as seen in quote 3, merges his status and the plight of heaven, making it impossible to question the government in a Christian society, which is perpetuated by his pride. When religion is involved in the government, the actions of that government become synonymous with that of the gospel, ensuring that any action taken by a government official becomes holy. With the pride of his status and the piety from his Lord, his word, as he claims it is reverberated from God, becomes law, and to question his word is to question God. Moving on to slide 4. Religion as a whole acts as a means to explain the unknowability of the universe and the unexplained in daily life. When something strange occurs, it is easier to write it off as an act of God or the devil rather than get to the bottom of it. While in regards to daily life, this can provide ease and comfort to the mind, but when this same sentiment is placed in the government, this leads to indiscrepancies and the burial of truth. As seen in these quotes, since religion explains all time, the need to search and uncover the truth dissipates, especially under times of crisis and pressure. Like Mary and Abigail, one could simply call the name of another as a witch or a commie to relieve themselves of that pressure. When applied to government leaders, however, dissenters of one's political career could be at risk of excommunication from society if they are called out as anti-God. In a religious system, this means their end, and the end to truth if the claim is not questioned, which, thanks to the piety and pride that is inherent to a religious government, is unlikely to be questioned. Moving on to slide 5. Furthermore, bias makes those who do not fit Christian viewpoints as an enemy of the state. Bias is inevitable in any government, but it is highly exemplified in a system where those who do not fall under the same bias are condemned. In the play, Danforth and Mr. Parris accuse or judge Proctor because he does not fit their Christian biases. Proctor does not go to church, therefore Parris calls him out for mischief. After Proctor states that God is dead in regards to the justice system, he is then arrested by Danforth. All of this goes to show that when gospel becomes law, freedom of religion and freedom of speech become felonies. Moving on to slide 6. The current U.S. President, Donald Trump, is a religious man and a part of a heavily Christian political party. There is nothing wrong with that. However, Trump has made efforts to impose Christianity onto the rest of the United States government, and even worse than that is the fact that it is working. With mass layoffs in the federal government and the subsequent Republican replacements, rallies with religious undertones, and mass deportation justified by religion, the current state of the U.S. has shown starting signs of another witch hunt. This target of the contemporary Crusades being immigrants. Moving on to slide 7. Trump has called for the termination of federal emergency management agency employees who have worked in climate, environmental justice, and DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. All of these factors are typically supported by leftists and leftist beliefs. Naturally, these FEMA agents would probably align with leftist beliefs and would oppose Trump's policies. In the Crucible, dissenters of the church and of the court are accused of being aligned with Satan. Although in this example there is no accusation necessarily, it represents the same principle of removing opposition to stop healthy debate for a single goal. These people are at liberty to align themselves with whichever political party they wish, and because their job leans to the opposite direction than Trump's, they have been removed from the spot that they earned. This is bias with a blade's edge. Furthermore, his goal with the newly founded Faith Office is to, quote, investigate and, quote again, stop anti-Christian bias. This is another example of this. Like mentioned with the Crucible, it is important to ensure that no single bias takes up all the room in any given debate. Whether it is a Christian or non-Christian or anything else of the like, it is important to have diversity of opinion in any given situation. New perspectives offer new ideas and solutions, after all, but Trump's goal to stop anti-Christian bias is concerning, as it may signify a change in the White House that only flies a Christian banner, much like the court in the Crucible. Lastly, federal workers on both probationary and with full civil service protections are targeted for termination except for postal service workers, services necessary for law enforcement, national security, and immigration obligations. With the exception of the Postal Service, the only federal workers who are safe from termination are those that enforce law and carry out orders. While conspiracy should be avoided, it is impossible to ignore the consequences of this action and how eerily similar they are to the Crucible. If the president's plan to remove non-Christian views and federal workers who are not obligated to enforce Trump's values succeeds, he would essentially create an only Christian Knights Templar that would not oppose Trump's orders or speak out against him. The Crucible demonstrates a government weaponized under a single belief. The Trump administration looks to the Crucible and pines for that same kind of power, and the efforts to achieve it are being made by the government right now. Moving on to slide 8, it becomes clear how the government sharpens itself at all. And it's in the same way the court does in the Crucible. With the creation of the God Bless the USA Bible, otherwise known as the Trump Bible, and the Faith Administration, Trump is able to build himself as a religious figure. To his followers, he represents a renaissance of faith in America, and so his perception is typically in tandem with religion. So he and his administration appeal to that perception to justify their practices and beliefs when put under fire. The official website for the God Bless the USA Bible states that it is the only Bible endorsed by President Donald J. Trump and Lee Greenwood. And that's in quotes. This encourages his followers to trust him and his version of the Bible, including political messaging, rather than the Bible their Lord instructed to be written and read. Furthermore, the Vice President J.D. Vance at a March for Liberty rally said, "I want more babies in the United States of America," which is a belief that many Christians and right-wingers would appreciate, as a main concern of theirs is the sanctity of the American family unit. With both of these examples, both the president and the vice president have weaved themselves into religion, at least in the minds of their followers. And in the same way that Danforth associates himself with the gospel because of his status, Trump and Vance, as well as their followers, consider the administration as aligned with Christ and just as unquestionably moral as the gospel. Therefore, they are justified in whatever action they may take, even if it violates natural human rights. For example, President Trump violated religious freedoms and DHS policies to deport migrants while in church. Places of worship act as a sanctuary against deportation, as they are still entitled to their natural rights to freedom of religion regardless of legality. Although this may seem like an obvious violation of their freedom to express religion, Trump's followers do not see it in the same way. In the Crucible, those who challenge the court or are not in the favor of an accuser are quickly called out as being anti-God, anti-government, and or witches. The same is true now. Since the Trump administration has cemented itself as a divine entity on the side of the Lord, those who were not in favor of the administration are then easily and comfortably looked down upon as enemies to the state and the sanctity of their religion. In this case, Trump supporters don't bat an eye when immigrants have their rights revoked because they simply must be the enemy. And it must be a religious responsibility of Trump to deport them. Why should they have rights in this country when they are clearly trying to destroy it? Why should a witch have water to drink when she is sided with the devil? Moving on to slide 9. Because of this belief that is being perpetuated by the government, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness of immigrants, federal workers, and maybe someday soon every American citizen, the livelihood of many federal workers and immigrants who work towards progression and fight for the right to live are at stake. Religious freedom, the livelihood, and the rights of immigrants are taken away, despite the fact that humanity is expressly under equal God, therefore dehumanizing immigrants. Immigrants come to America to improve their lives, and the Trump administration is working to deter their pursuit of happiness in a country devolving into the mass hysteria-riddled Salem depicted in Arthur Miller's 1950s play. Moving on to slide 10. When every eye is covered with one banner, it becomes exceedingly difficult to see any other flag. The government is supposed to protect equality by ensuring natural rights for all, but under a single belief, the government's job can shift into protecting, perpetuating, and enforcing that belief. In the same way that Abigail, Danforth, and Paris abuse and perpetuate said abuse, the current U.S. president uses religion to legitimize his practices and beliefs to justify the personal vendettas he has against a portion of the American population, being immigrants. Both the Crucible and the current state of American politics serve to demonstrate the folly of one belief being held to the principles of an entire nation, and the abuse that follows. Although Proctor was hesitant for personal reasons, like he attempted to do, nations need to hold their leaders accountable for preserving natural rights. Religion or a religious politician is not a bad thing, but an entire system that operates on one belief that controls a diverse group of people is oppression. And that concludes my oral presentation. Thank you.